It's one of the Sputnik. Bring you guys another gameplay commentary. This is Black Desert Online, and this will be my series on how to play a Sorc. Right, this will be the first one, which I guess I'll call it Beginner's Guide, and it'll be like a three-part series. So beginners, intermediary, or intermediate, and advanced. Now, I might also have some advanced or intermediate uh, topics in the beginner's guide, in the beginners section, or might have advanced stuff in the intermediate or beginner stuff in the advanced. But for the most part, if you're looking at the beginners, that will mainly have beginner related stuff. If you're looking at the intermediate, that will mainly have intermediate stuff and etc. Right? So and a lot of the stuff that this is for console. I play specifically I play on the PlayStation 5, but this can apply to Xbox players as well. And this is just my take on playing Sorc, right? These are my opinions. They should not be seen as, holier than thou, right? These are just opinions. You can always disagree on opinions, right? We all have different ways that we play a particular game, and I would like people to, kind of understand that. I just had to throw that caveat out there. Also, um, some of the stuff I say, especially the stuff I'm getting ready to say now, these are like these things that I'm getting ready to discuss are mainly just preferred. It's not mandatory, right? It's not. It's preferred, right? And a lot of this stuff can apply to like 1v1s, small scale. I like small scale. I'm not really into large scale play. I've played Siege. I've been in some top Siege guilds. I've done it. I did a lot of Siege last summer up until like December until I got kicked because I just can't make Saturday. I can't just devote my time to that. They should change Siege to like an off day. Sunday maybe. Or if you're religious, I mean the Sabbath for most religion is a Saturday. Um, but maybe a Thursday. I can probably commit to a Thursday. Anyway, I'm getting long winded here. It's been like 3 minutes. I've yet to talk about some of the things that I think will benefit you, especially as a Sorc, right? It can apply to other classes as well. So the first thing you need to do is play Claw. Now again, this is not required, but it's preferred. And the reason for that is that a Sorc, a lot of the skills that a Sorc uses require you to use your right analog. Right, most classes in this game, you can use your left analog stick and not really worry too much about it. But if you're not familiar with Claw, it's essentially taking your index finger and having that hover over your buttons, right? So on the PlayStation, it'll be triangle, square, X, and circle. That index button moves away from your R1 button, and it allows you to use that index finger, which is right next to your thumb. Um, it allows you to use that finger to press those buttons. So essentially, you don't have to remove your finger, remove your thumb finger from the right analog stick, because as I mentioned before, a Sorc has to target a lot of its skills you require to target, and especially when you're playing frontal. Frontal is more of a conal, right? So if you're using a frontal skill, you might not necessarily be facing the player, but your frontal is up and the player could be to the side of you. As long as your camera is looking towards that player, right, your frontal will block that area, right? And it really comes in handy, especially if, I find myself oftentimes doing this move where my frontal is up and it looks as if I'm not protected, but most of the times I am, right? Another skill is Cry of Darkness, right? I could leave Cry of Darkness and I can be here and have to be able to use my analog stick to target a player, my right analog stick, right? So that's one of the reasons I suggest playing Claw, because most players, if they're not playing Claw, they then have to remove their fingers their thumb from the right analog stick and start pressing those buttons. And to me, that split second really creates a problem. All right. And that's one of the things. It's not preferred. You don't have to do that. You can get a scuff controller where you can map those buttons to the back, and you can have maybe a pinky finger or your middle finger, access those buttons if you map them correctly. Right. And this is from first person shooter days, right? When you would change it to tactical, you would have the drop shot, right? Or a jump shot or what have you. So that's why I would recommend playing Claw. I'll post a link in the video to some of the Claw videos on YouTube. Also a video that I posted about Claw. The other thing is a Sorc goes the best way to explain this is that a Sorc is a class, especially if you're an awakened class. A Sorc has to move from pre-awakened to awakened back to pre-awakened, right? This is the constant game that's like you're playing, where you're essentially, moving seamlessly from pre-awakened to awakened and awakened to pre-awakened. And there's some skills that allow you to do that, but for the most part, you will be active, like manually switching, right? And the triangle is the swap button. Now, again, if you don't play Claw, that can become an issue because that's the uppermost button. And so you will most likely have to remove your finger from the right analog stick. And to me, that split second can create an issue, especially if you're fighting a solid player or, you're an open world, you're outnumbered, and you really need, your skills are in cooldown and you really need to get to, awakened, right? So a solution to that, and this is something I've been doing since my Elder Scrolls days, is you would go to your settings. I know Xbox has this as well. You can also do this in game, but I think it's, I'm accustomed to doing it outside of the game. You go to accessibilities, you go to controller, and then you customize. So custom button assignments for dual sense wireless controller. So what I've done is I've mapped the triangle button to R3, still staying with this whole concept of not moving my thumb off of the right analog stick, because as Sorcs, it's very important for us to maintain constant movement. Well, not constant movement, but be able to use your right analog stick to target, enemy players. That's one of the things that we have to use, right? It's one of the things. So I've mapped my triangle button, which, swaps stance from pre-awakened to awakened or from awakened to pre-awakened. and I have that mapped to triangle to R3. I also have um, uh, left directional on the D-pad, left on the D-pad, and I have that mapped to my L3. And that also prevents me from having to touch, remove my left thumb from the right analog, right? I really want to continue to stay on my left and right analog sticks, right? It's very important because I play claw and I still have access to R1, R2, L1, and L2, while at the same time having access to all of the buttons due to my index finger. But what's most important is mapping your stance swap from triangle to R3, right? Because it's very important. You have to be able to like seamlessly swap. Your cancels become easier. So let's say, you wanted to go from pre-awakened to, awakened. You can easily do that. Let's say you wanted to cancel, this is a very hard cancel, where you canceled from pre-awakened to awakened into turn backslash, right? So that really makes it a lot easier, right? It makes it a lot easier if your triangle button is on R3, right? So, so just keep that in mind. Another thing that I do, which is very, very beneficial, I play, and this is probably for anyone that plays in a fast-paced game. I play on a monitor that's 24 inches, right? The highest I would go is probably 28, but I stick to 24 or lower than that, right? And maybe 19 is the 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 screen size that I would go, the the least that I would go, but 24 seems to be like a sweet spot for me, right? And I play on a monitor. Monitors tend to have less input lag. Classes that really benefit from smooth frames and faster frames are Sorcs, right? A Sorc, a Warrior, classes that don't really benefit from that. It's more like these SA classes. Well, these SA classes, but Striker, Mystic, Guardian, they kind of excel at this kind of slow pace. I think overall all classes excel, especially in this game, at having better frames, but it's not that much of a hindrance to classes that don't rely heavily on on cancels, right? So that's one thing I do. The other thing that I do, which what you want to do, which I think is like most people don't really talk about this, but I use it a lot. See this adjust UI size, map this to your your ring menu, and what it does, because you don't want to, the reason I don't play on a large monitor or a TV is because I don't want to move my head. I want to move my eyes. And even when I have to move my eyes, I don't want to have to move my eyes left, right, up, down. I want to be able to use my peripheral to just focus on what's going on in the center of my screen and then use my peripheral to spot people. Right. And this really helps out because what it does is it condenses your entire screen to make things more compact, and you can view it. So let's say if I had it this way, you'll notice that my map is more towards the upper right, and like the view is expanded a bit more, right? If you take a look at these two people and I stay here, to me, there's more it's more spaced out, and I have to try to focus. I can't really look at one guard and at the other guard, simultaneously. I can't do it at the same time. And even if I'm using my peripheral, it just seems, too far away from me, right? But if I bring it down, you'll notice I don't have that much of an issue, right? I can pretty much see both of them, and I don't have to move my eyes that much, right? It's not that much of a strain on my peripheral, and it allows me to see more of the screen in a condensed version versus having to move my eyes left and right or up and down. Okay. Another thing that you should definitely do, and this is something you need to do as a sort, you need to pan your screen all the way out. So your directional pad, hold down on down on the directional pad to move your screen, to pan out or zoom in. And that's on your right analog. And then if you use your left analog, you get to, decide where your cursor lands. Now, for most classes, this might not be an issue, but for sorcs, it's a major issue. If your cursor is here, right, and you cast, blades, look what happens. I have to now adjust this to try it. Just remember, as a sorc, we have to target players, right? If I use Dream of Doom, this is a target. I have to target players using most sorcs know this, right? They know that you have to target. But let's say if I wanted to use, Cry of Darkness, and I'm here. If I hover over here, I don't have my cursor on this guy. I mean, here I have it, but I would have to do this, right? Just to cast it. Let's go over here some more. You see what happens? I would have to move this way to launch it. But if you do this, I mean, as long as you make sure it's not, so far up where you can't see behind you. If you this is, to me, I think this is like the sweet spot. Look what happens, right? I can be here and still target this player, and I don't have to be close by, and then I don't have to be really close to the player. Then it also allows me to have a target that's further out, so I can be here and launch Blade of Darkness versus if I had it down here, right? If I have it down here, I can't target this guy. If I have it up here, I can target him with no issues. So that's another, like, these are just tips that you can use immediately to make it more convenient for you to play Sorc, and just use all of the Sorc's kit. Okay. All right. So let's get into the skills. The first thing I want to point out is that because some players might look here and say, well, you're already geared, and so, or you have a high gear score, and so some of the issues we deal with as Sorcs, you don't have to deal with it. But I've been playing Sorc for a while, over 2 years, on console, and I've been below 300 AP. I've been at 301. I've been at 305. I've been, at 309. I've been at 316. I've been at 323. Might have gotten a few of the brackets there, but after 305, 301 is a solid damage. 305 is great damage. Everything else is just, additions, right? They're just, they're just adding on to the damage that you have. You want to have more damage, right? I'm not really a fan of, evasion Sorc, unless you're in siege and you're in the ball. But again, I personally think Sorc should be in flex, not in the ball. And if you're a good Sorc, you will do well on flex team. I just don't think. I mean, you can do well in the ball as well. When I was on Siege, I did well. The ball, I was, I would have 50, 60 kills. Now the deaths are a little bit different. But again, I like 1v1s. Well, I like small scale. Not really into like Siege, and I don't like to close my eye and Q buff and go in and get feeds. Like those things don't really satisfy me. But anyway, I went off on a tangent here. So I know some of you might be saying, well, you don't really have to worry about um, damage. You still do have to worry about damage. I try to go all damage, and I'm pretty much I'm C15 on everything with an exception of Griffin. I refuse to do it. I can go C15, right? I have enough Kaffers to go. I have enough Kaffers to go C15 if I wanted to, right? I'm just, once they come out with Labresca, then I'll probably go to C10. But this is where I'll stay. But everything else is C15. I went all damage, right? Sorc is a unique, well, I wouldn't say unique in the sense of, the different types of play styles, but Sorc is unique because it can survive well in a high damage meta with low DP, right? It's the opposite of what a striker or a mystic can do, especially a mystic, where they can have a hybrid, right? DP evasion and be at maybe in the 280s, like maybe 289 AP, and still do damage. Mystic can even go lower than that. They can be in the 270s and just heavily go into like that hybrid, DP evasion kind of setup, because there's no inverse relationship between DP and evasion like there is between AP and accuracy. And we do suffer from accuracy issues, and we're magic, so we are at a disadvantage on paper when it comes to striker mystic, right? But I think we match up well with them. There's nothing they can do. The only thing they can do is essentially, get CC'd and survive, because they have a 10% reduction on magic damage, etc. Right? But I just want to point out that we can have, a decent amount of DP and still survive that, because we can kind of, go between iframes and frontals, right? You can almost keep up your frontal indefinitely, right? And it lingers. And frontals depend on a lot of variables, right? Your health, your DR, your resistance, etc. And if you can get those things, you can really mitigate a lot of damage coming your way. Just don't get caught in SA, right? Don't get caught staying too long in Grim, or else it can be problematic. All right, so let's go into the skills. And so I'll just go to the skills that I think are beneficial, that almost every Sorc uses. So this is Shadow Eruption. This, prior to the rework, this used to be unprotected. This is the only, technically the only CC protected skill that a Sorc has. This is it, right? This is super armor, and it's a float. Technically, that's what it is. The next skill that's a CC that's protected, if we add core to it, is Grim. Grim by itself on charge is SA. unreleased, it is not. We have to add it to the core skill. So Sorc only has one protected CC. And as you can see, the damage is not, it's literally nothing, right? So, and this is an engage. So Shadow Eruption, then the next skill that you want to pay very close attention to. This skill is amazing. This is Midnight Stinger, right? This skill, almost 99.9% of the Sorc skills can be canceled. A few of them cannot, and that is Shadow Hellfire. This, you cannot cancel the animation, and this where I lock it. Once you go into the ultimate Shadow Eruption, there's a knockdown, and during that knockdown animation, you cannot cancel out of it. And so I've locked this. So you want Shadow Eruption, the absolute version, and just the naked version. And then again, you have Midnight Stinger. Amazing skill. I use this skill often. It's a stiff, right? I didn't even talk about this. So, if you don't know the CC mechanics, I have a video about this. But essentially, you know, each major CC counts as one, and you have a total of two. Let's say each major CC counts as one. The max you can go to is 2, but less than 3. I know it sounds weird, but and major CCs are stuns, knockdowns, you know, floats, bounds, and they're standing CCs, right? A stun is a standing CC. You know, a knockdown is a grounded CC. You cannot ground someone and then try to hit them with a stun. Doesn't go that way. You cannot do a standing CC to someone who's already grounded, but you can do a grounded CC to someone who's already who's on a standing CC, right? Stiffs don't count. Stiffs count as 0.7, so it's not officially like it's not a like a main CC. So a stiff will count as 0.7. So you can still land a float, and you'll see it says 1.7, and then now the play is fully immune, right? So you keep those things in mind, and they have different durations. This 5 seconds is not true. So a float is around 1.3 seconds. A stun close to like 1.9. A knockdown is probably like 2.1, right? A bound is probably 1 second, and a stiff is probably less than 1 second, right? And so if you know these things, the CC mechanic, because it's very important to Sorcs, right? The thing about a Sorc is that you need to know every matchup. You need to know what a class can and cannot do, right? And I give you guys a head start. The only class that you don't match up well against in this game is Suck Nova. Every other class, you're either positive or even, right? This, just like boxing, it's all about styles that make fights, right? A Suck Nova is just too random. And the worst thing you want to be is a Sorc fighting a class that's random, because you're a jack of all trades, right? You do well when it comes to countering. You're a melee class that has range capabilities. It's not the flip side where you're a range class that has melee capabilities. You can punish from afar, right? There's some advanced catches that you can do, right? You can stiff the person, swap off into turn back, and then swap off into Shadow Eruption, into Violation, into turn backslash into Grim, right? These are all the things you can do, right? So you can this person, you can launch, turn back, Shadow Leap into Violation, turn backslash, and then get into a lot of your things. But your main situation is that you are a melee player, and you can punish players. You can be upfront in their face, especially with Grim. You can range them. You can use blades to keep them at bay. You can use Dream of Doom, right? You have a block jump. You catch them with Nightmare. You can catch them with Carson Nightmare, which you can technically use. I tend to use it as a bait to move. Most players don't move it. But let's get back to these skills. Right, so Midnight Stinger is a stiff. It also adds some crit. Right, your crit hit rate is plus 40%. So we have Shadow Eruption. We have Midnight Stinger. Right, and this allows you to go from Awaken to pre-awaken. And Rabombs can do that as well, and I'll tell you guys the Rabomb that I use. So you can easily cancel out of a lot of things, right? Cancel turn backslash, go directly out of it into Midnight Stinger, right? I think this is an amazing skill. Really good players can Shadow Leap into Midnight Stinger, and that's a stiff into whatever else you want to do. And that's a great punish. Okay. So you have the float, which is Shadow Eruption. You have the stiff, Midnight Stinger. And then you have Darkness Release, right? So one is a knockback and one is a knockdown. So the knockback, if you go backwards with back in your analog, down in your analog stick and circle, it's a knockback. If you go forward on your analog stick, it's a knockdown. Knockdowns are amazing, right? You stay for a longer duration. You want to be ending things off with a knockdown, right? And then you can get into things like down smashes, right? And I'll talk about that in a bit. So so Darkness Release is essentially one of your bread and butter combo. So you get Shadow Eruption, you do some filler damage, and then Darkness Release, swap off, and then you can then turn backslash, Grim into like your down smashes, right? So again, Shadow Eruption, do whatever filler you want to do, right? Then into Darkness Release, and then turn backslash, and do those types of things, because you're essentially going float into a knockdown. So now the player is immune. And you can add any filler damage. Now here's another thing I forgot to mention. If you do a float and then you do another float, you notice all that. So if you do two floats consecutively, the float doesn't register. The second float doesn't register. Just the damage registers, right? Just the damage. And that's where you get the filler damage, and then you go into something like a knockdown, right? Some players will say, "Oh, that person didn't stay on the floor too long." I can explain why that might be the case. You might hit someone with a float, and then you're hitting them with down smashes. And a down smash, if you don't use the down smash after your CC limit, you can shorten the duration of your CC. So just keep that in mind. When in doubt, always use a down smash after you've passed the CC limit. And down smashes have a 30% chance to land. Okay. Then there's Bloody Calamity. That can also be used from pre-awakened, right? And you would just iframe and press X. I tend to use this. You can also add an add-on to this, but I tend to use this when, you've been chip damaging a player, and that player is so low, but they get up and they're grab class, so they want to wake up grab you, then you have to disengage, but they have like 10 health left. Just hit them with bloody. It drains their damage, their health, and it adds it to you a certain percentage. All right, so you've seen essentially two things that can take you from awakened to pre-awakened. This almost should tell you that you have to switch. It has to be like a seamless switch, right? This is more for advanced, right? Dark Flame. This is arguably, along with um, Cry of Darkness, Blades. This is probably one of the best neutral gameplays in the game, and I'll talk about this in the intermediate session. Beat Kick, I don't use it. There's a much better version of this, even though this is an evasion shred, right? Minus 11 evasion from the target for 10 seconds. It just doesn't have range, and it doesn't have the damage, and it's not versatile. And I'll show you guys what's a better version of it. And then you have Signs of Agony. This is a stun. I mean, I tend not to use this. If it's 1v1, you have a lot of Zerkers and warriors who just want to bum rush you, right? I never stand in front of players anyway, right? I always try to bait them, never really stand in front of them, because they can easily grab you. Grabs, you have to get on target for most of the grabs. So you really don't want to make it easy for them. But some Zerkers, especially the succession ones, just feel as if they can just run up to you, and you can easily catch them with a stun just by using this. I tend not to use it often. Sometimes I might use it, sometimes I might not. But it all depends on the situation, right? And then we have Dream of Doom. And you'll notice on a Sorc there are a lot of skills that tell you this allows you to cancel out of it, right? There's a long version of Dream of Doom, and then there's a short version where you can cast it really quickly, right? A lot of players are hesitant to use this, but the more you play Sorc, the more you know the distance, when you can use it, right? When you can catch players with this, right? You get these nice little setups. And the more you play Sorc, the more you'll know your range, your positioning, your timing. And I have videos about this. Just look up, all of my Sorc videos. I tend to have them. I don't have really good titles, so you'll have to do a bit of searching. All right, so Dream of Doom, Shadow Kick. It gives an accuracy buff, right? A magic accuracy buff. We are a magic class. The only thing is, since the rework, for some reason, this skill is very slow, right? The startup is slow right after. And it might seem as if it's not, but it is. Especially when you're in a heated fight, and you get a CC, and you want to follow up, go into midnight, and you go to it's a very slow skill, and it just, I would not use it. If you get a full CC and it's a player that's squishy, you just want to kill them really quickly, you can easily do that, especially if you're over 301 or 305 AP. But I would tend to stay away from this. But as a Sorc, you should definitely know what skills you have on cooldown, and muscle memory will help you. And then there's Nitro. This is the skill players tend to have issues with, right? This is an iframe with no cooldown. As you can see, it says 0 seconds, but there's a stamina cost associated with it. It's 250. It used to be 200. So we've gotten a nerf. It went up. And after you're out of stam, you can use your shards of darkness to get super armor. So let me show you guys what it would look like. All right, so you have an iframe here, and then now you use your shards, it becomes an essay, right? You can also use this. You can also use Nitro on Scythe stance, but it's a 1 second cooldown. It used to be 2 seconds, but they've since changed it since the rework. So it's 1 second now. So these are the skills that that you use, right? You use Midnight Stinger, Shadow Eruption, you know, Darkness Release, Midnight Stinger. These are essentially the skills that you use. And of course, you want to lock the ultimate because there's no way to cancel out of that animation. And as a Sorc, the fact that you can cancel out of pretty much anything is amazing because you can bait players. You can play neutral really well. Let's get to the awakened area. We are an awakened Sorc. Shadow Leap. Now, this skill, because of the cooldown, and this skill was nerfed. And I'll get into this before. This skill was nerfed, and even in the test servers, they had a severe nerf which they reverted. Right, it would instead of taking magic, right, magic points, it would take stam. Right, they reverted that because it was a major hindrance to the playstyle and the lore and how the class plays, right? A Sorc is a quick class, meaning, it can cover, short range, right? But it's not a catch class in terms of like from range, right? So it can do a lot of things in that kind of short, in a short area. But if you're attempting to do things long range, it can be a problem. But you can get around that. You can definitely get around it. You can extend your range to the point where everything is catchable, right? So Shadow Leap does that. Shadow Leap allows you to punish players who really don't think you can get to them, right? A good example of that, well, I have two examples, right? You have an awakened Zerker who, for some reason, believes he can do Titan Blow and not get punished, right? And if you know this, Titan Blow, right? I think it's a locked animation after like the first movement. But if you're a Sorc and Titan Blows is an iframe, Shadow Leap into Violation is an amazing catch. And the moment you shut that down maybe once or twice, they're not doing it anymore. And if they are doing it, they're doing it to the point where they're so far away, your frontal guard is really mitigating most of Titan Blow's damage. A lot of players I fight, they're like, how are you surviving? So I'm playing frontal, but they're so far away because they don't want to get punished with that frontal, because Shadow Leap can do that. Shadow Leap can also allow you to disengage, right? Oftentimes you'll see in some of my videos, I will disengage, go into Midnight Stinger, into a different skill, right? Dark Flame, right? Dark Flame is I use Dark Flame a lot. So it allows you to disengage and play that kind of inside in and out kind of approach. So Shadow Leap is amazing. I know a lot of evasion. I think evasion Sork is like an oxymoron, moronic kind of thing. Not in a. I'm not saying the player. I'm just saying it's like saying King Crab. um. So Shadow Leap is amazing for that. It allows you to keep players honest. If a player wants to iframe in front of you, you can punish them. If a Megu is using her clone, and the clone for that split second, it's a frontal, you can always catch it, right? Or at least attempt to catch it so they'll know they have to be honest, right? They don't want to just cast skills that are frontal guards. And this is why you need to have that kind of you need to have that knowledge on these classes, right? Dead Hunt, I don't use it. It's just too slow of an animation, especially in this high damage meta. It's just too slow. You can use it in 1v1s, but this tutorial, I don't have any like fancy stuff. I'm to the point, and I'll tell you guys some combos that I use in open world that allows you like the last part of your CC to be fully protected. Violation unprotected, Dead Hunt unprotected, but Violation is amazing if you mix it up with Shadow Leap, right? This is a catch that I use quite often. And you get to the point where you can, if you really know your range and your distance, and you're using positioning, you could really catch players and you're out of their range where you can catch them but they can't catch you. So that's a good catch, but you have to be confident. Soul Reaper, this is a finisher. This is an amazing skill for what I'll explain. So Soul Reaper by itself, right? It's a finisher skill, right? Sorks, they gave us this skill because Sorks were running into issues where they would use Grim and then nothing else. And they could not get the kill, right? A lot of players believe we just use Grim and we kill everything. If Grim is on cooldown, we are not killing anything. All right. If we can't use Grim, we are not killing anything. But Soul Reaper is that finisher, right? And we use it for two reasons. One reason is to finish, right? Maybe three. The second reason is to kind of regen stam, because in the past we used to be able to regen stam while we're using Shadow Leap. They nerfed that, right? So we don't regen any stam, right? So you'll see a lot of Sorks, sometimes they'll use Grim, right? They use Grim into Soul Reaper, into swirling, because they're just attempting to regen their stam, right? And that's a fully protected CC there. And the most important reason we use it is for that down smash, right? In the past, and this is prior to the rework, Sorks used to have a 100% down smash. Blade of Darkness, when you launch Blade of Darkness, the flow, Cry of Darkness, you used to have 100% down smash, right? You used to be able to launch it with the players on the floor. That would be a down smash. Down smashes for other classes were 30%. That's the standard. You have a 30% chance to land a down smash. And as I mentioned before, once you pass that CC limit, your thing now is to land those down smashes, right? So you can extend that player and eventually kill them, right? Even at my AP, I have to still extend players, especially the Zerkers who are geared, right? Have similar gear to me, the Mystics, and the Strikers, and the Valks, and even some Guardians, right? So you have to be able to land these down smashes, and um, you have Flow. I'm sorry, you have Soul Reaper, right, which allows you to get a down smash. You have Swirling, which allows you to get a down smash. And you have Cry of Darkness, which allows you to get a down smash. So you're essentially attempting to stack down smashes. Some sorts, for some reason, feel as if they've made it easier to down smash players. No, I would take the 100% down smash versus a 30% chance to down smash by stacking down smashes, because one is RNG and one's a guarantee. So, if you're down smash, it just doesn't land. You might not be able to get your kill. Use your kill skill, right, which is Grim, right? So I don't know where that kind of mentality came in. Sorks just tend to shoot themselves in the foot. I don't know. It's just a weird way of thinking. Um, and then I mentioned before that we have a better version of Beat Kick, and that better version is Turn Back Slash. Turn Back Slash, um, Cry of Darkness, and Dark Flame. These are the three skills I think make Sorc what it is. Right? I just think these three skills are amazing because they've increased the range of Turn Back Slash, right? So it's an evasion shred, so you get 9%, and you also can add an add-on to add an additional 4%, so you get a 13% evasion reduction, right? If the player is a striker or a mystic, you're just reducing them by 4% because they have a 9% magic reduction or 10%, something to that effect, right? And this skill is amazing because this skill is the ultimate bait skill, right? The range is amazing, right? If you just know the range, that's the range. From here, this is your range. And it's a bound, even though a bound is probably the worst CC you can have, because most of the time, the player will, fall to the ground and stand back up, and you're thinking, oh, was that a CC or not, right? And you have to learn that, it's a bound, right? And it's a different type of CC, so it works in your CC mechanic. And a bound is like a second, so it's another issue in terms of duration. But Turn Back Slash is amazing because of the range, and you can cancel it, right? The cancel is easy if you play Claw, right? It's an iframe and hold down on your left analog stick and press R2, right? So it's an easy cancel. And if you're in pre-awakened, and I showed this before, if you're in pre-awakened, then you iframe here, you can get the most. I think some players don't think you can do this on console, but you can, right? You can essentially, like when you iframe out, what's going on? There you go. When you iframe and you swap stance, you can get the turn back. I do this often. I think this skill is amazing. You can pop your frontal here, right? And you're not really standing in front of the player, so you're not, seeing who's faster on the draw. They have to get to you. They have to target you. You can either turn back slash over here, or you can turn back slash here, Right, there are a lot of things you can do. All right, you can shadow leap, turn back slash from the back. I catch this a lot. All right, and do a lot of things. This skill is amazing. It keeps players honest, especially if you have blades up, right? And you're poking, you're doing a lot of stuff, and they want to charge. You launch blades, blade comes out, you turn back slash. It's a catch because they're, they have to be honest. If they grab you, they'll get hit with blades. If they miss the grab, turn back hits them, right? Because there's that split second, and you just have to be able to time it. And it's, amazing skill. Swirling, another really good skill. I use swirling instead of, swirling has range, and I use it instead of like shadow kick. Right, swirling also has that accuracy, so you get 6% magic accuracy for 10 seconds. And look what it is. It's a down smash, 30% chance. Right, amazing skill. You can also use this to regen your stam. It does not take stamina the same way this does not take stamina, so keep those things in mind. Right, you have Carson's nightmare. I use this as a bait. You can cancel out of it. I also use this to move my character, so I never stand in front of players, and when they jump on me, I can easily cancel it out, and not really worry too much about it. I use this as a bait all the time. And if you catch a player once or twice, they will give it to you for free. um, Nightmare, another mix up. Amazing skill. It's a really good way. Most sorks use this to get away, but I use this in the same way I use Shadow Leap, right? I use this as a setup, right? Remember I mentioned your right analog stick, you're using this as a way to kind of target players. I might Shadow Leap and then, Nightmare right behind them, right? You can do that. You can use that kind of setup. You Shadow Leap, swirling, Nightmare right behind them. You have so many ways to do this setup. And then, you know, um, there's so many things that you can do. And now to get out of it, you can come out and then go right back in. Most sorks use it this way. I tend to use it more offensively and defensively, especially if I'm in small scale. I tend to use that. Um, right, and I take the core grim. Uh, in the past, you used to be able to use this for range players. I never used it. I think they removed the core version of this. Dead Hunt. I wouldn't use it. Maybe you'll use this in I don't PVE on a sort. And even if I did, it wouldn't be in an awakened sword. It'd be a succession sword. Grim, right? On release, on charge, it's SA. On release, if you put the core, it's protected, right? Um, I would not use, if anyone tells you use turn back slash, then I would not listen to them, right? And it's not a linger SA, right? If you use this as a core, oh, I don't have any skill books. I guess I don't. All right, but turn back slash, because they've increased the range, is better. You're better off using it this way. That's a great way to catch. All right, you're better off using it this way. Why use turn back slash when it's like probably the worst CC type, the bound, and you don't want to, like, why would you want to be protected there, right? Uh, like it'll make you much more of a beast right? And so that's pretty much it for the two, right? Um, you have Darkness Release, you have Shadow Eruption, you have Midnight Stinger, we talked about Crow, we have Karshan, we have Grim. You know, everyone knows about Grim. I don't really need to talk about the bread and butter for damage when it comes to Sork. Um, and then let's take a look at my Rabam. So I use Shadow Ignition. Shadow Ignition. This is a CC. And I use this as a like a fishing. Like I'll fish for a CC. Right, I'll fish for it. If I don't get it, I'll use this. I don't try to use this when you've CC'd the player to use it again because it's an air smash. And as I mentioned before, an air smash can shorten the duration of your CC, right? So I tend not to use it. I only use it probably as an engage, right? I use engulfing shadow, right? It's SA, it pushes you forward, right? And I have this on my L3. It, you know, like a Rabam, it takes you from awaken to pre-awaken and it pushes you forward. And it also has a similar animation, right? And let's say if your iframe, your 1 second cool, like you can't use another iframe for that moment, you can easily, you know, skip into, you know, that Rabam, engulfing shadow. Some players use this. Listen, I've said this before. I'm a melee Sork, right? That has range capabilities. And it's a frontal, and I don't know why players will want to, and it's stationary, right? It doesn't really move you. And why would you? I mean, I've been caught with it once or twice, but the moment I realize what it is, I then try to punish it. Um, so I would, you're a melee class. If you want to play much more range or passive, and there are passive Sorks, right? There are a few Sorks I have issues with that I've probably never gone positive against because of how they play. Like I'm more of an aggressive in your face kind of player. I tend to take chances, um, but those Sorks have limited. It's not a lot of them, and so I don't really use this. I'm not saying it just doesn't suit my play style. Shadow Hellfire, there's no use for this. It locks you into the animation. And there's a much better version, right? Oh, Dark Flame, right? You can cancel out of Dark Flame anytime, and you can catch players with it all the time, right? Um, Dark Flame used to have a gap, and it used to give you a CC, but now it's a full frontal with no gap, and you have no CC. So I guess that's a trade-off. I don't use Shadow Wave. It just takes the cooldown is too long. So that's what, you know, I only have two Raboms that I use, right? I use Engulfing, which is on my triangle. And I have Shadow Ignition is on my triangle and Engulfing is on my L3. I'm sticking with that same concept of not removing my thumbs from my left and right analog stick. Now, my add-ons, it's not the typical. Most Sorks have something a little bit different. I use Midnight Stinger, Dream of Doom. I really enjoy using this skill to slow players' movement speed and their cast speed. I also have that on turn back slash. So in case the player CCs me, I've already slowed them, right? Their attack speed. They can move, but if they want to CC and kill me, then that might be a problem for them. Dream of Doom, almost every Sork has this setup. Turn back slash. Because it's an evasion debuff, I would add an additional 4%. Grim, self-explanatory. I want to hit these players with as much damage as possible. But Grim really puts you at a disadvantage because a grab player will try to grab you. I mean, there are ways to kind of, you know, get away from that. But good players, the moment they see you in Grim, ninjas always want to block jump you. Kunos always want to block jump you. Speedsters always want to get behind you and lay into you because it's an SA, right? Grab classes just run up and go to grab you. It's hilarious. Swirling, I added that 15% chance. Just remember, a down smash is 30%. You add 15% chance to down smash. It goes from 30 to 45%, close to 50. Soul Reaper, again, another 50% down smash chance. Most people don't have this setup, but I do. It works for me. It might not work for you. Some players might have Bloody Calamity here, a Calamari, and they might have, Dead Hunt, uh, you know, and Carson's Nightmare. I don't have it here, but you can have that. It's up to you. I don't. Again, these are all just suggestions. And so yeah, that's and the reason these two come in handy is because once you pass that CC, limit, you start to pile on your down smashes, then you realize that, wow, I got the damage in, I extended this player, and I was able to kill them, right? Let's take a look at my crystals and what I have. I do have a Garmoth heart, so I have additional crystal slots. Right, so let's go to Black Spirit. And I have two setups, right? So I have the more human damage. So Elcars, Red Spirit, Corrupted, really good damage in Corrupted. Glorious. And if you have Garmoth, I mean, you can decide what you want to do. Most would go with this and probably remove one of the Vipers. Well, not Jin Viper, but Red Battlefield. And then I think this one is, let's view the effects. I think this one is the movement one. Yeah. And then I have another setup that I have, and that's mainly for this is mainly for evasion memes. Let me just go back to it. So you'll see that I have, this is all accuracy. So I have these accuracy crystals, right? Black magic, ensnare, and then I have just the infinity precisions. I get up to 937 along with 327 AP, 372 DP. So yeah, this is essentially the beginner's guide, and I'll do the intermediate guide, and I'll do the advanced guide. Hopefully this was helpful. If there are anything that you would like to see in the future, just let me know. This is a long video. I didn't know. Man, can I talk? Anyway, I'm out.